Okay. Well, again, Katie, we're so excited to have you with us today. And Katie is a social impact education designer through and through. She's done some really amazing things in her career. She is very driven to help schools and organizations change the way they work. At the end of the day, it sounds like what gets you out of bed every morning, Katie. You get very excited and passionate about all kinds of ways that you can do that. So she has coached school leaders, educators, nonprofit leaders, and even corporate executives over the years to develop their design mindsets and really help people across the board figure out how to leverage human-centered design to make the world a better place and through learning. Currently, she is at the global, currently, she's the Global Innovation and Design Advisor at the Aga Khan Foundation, where she created an award-winning toolkit for local educators to use to guide their work locally, internationally. And so she's going to share quite a bit about that with you here today. And before the foundation, she was the director at the SMU Maker Education Project and program manager at Stanford's K-12 lab network. So she's been doing this work for quite some time in lots of different, very cool ways. And she's been very impactful with lots of different people in our Desklight network as well. So again, we are very thrilled to have her. I'm going to hand the virtual mic over to her here. And as you have questions throughout her talk, feel free to chat those in, and Sarah and I will watch and gather those and share those with Katie at the end. So over to you, Katie.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me this morning. And thank you for that introduction. It's wonderful to be here and share some of the work that we're doing at AKF to help to hand over the reins to teachers to be more in control of the decisions that happen, that make change in their schools. So I'm going to share my screen and oh, okay, great. So one of the kind of organizing questions of the Schools 2030 initiative, which is the initiative I'm going to be talking about today, focusing on, is how might we better catalyze inclusive quality learning experiences across schools, systems, and societies. Let's see. Okay, so in the education space, we know what needs to change or improve. We know that there are systemic inequities, that there are issues with stress and pressure and well-being and mental health. We know that coming out of the pandemic, we have all of these learning losses. So big challenges, and the things that we want to improve, we know are clear to us. And I think that the real question is how do we make those changes? And what can we do to actually move the needle towards positive change? But before we get into how, I just want to say again, right, we know that the K-12 education system needs to shift to meet those needs of the 21st century. And I always joke that we're going to have to stop saying this at some point because we're already, a fifth of the way through. And the question is, again, how do we do that? We know that schools and school systems are incredibly resistant and resilient to change. And we know change is hard. And innovation is harder, right? So just making a change in a policy is difficult and requires strong leadership and change management. Moving into a space that's unknown is all the more difficult. And it makes sense, right? Because the things that are perhaps easy to implement we don't think of as very innovative. So by nature, innovation, I think it requires a real leap to get there. So I like to use this analogy to think about this move towards more innovative ideas, and thinking about that process of, walking through a dark woods. And for most of us, we're not willing to just kind of run into the darkness with no idea of kind of where we're going or what's out there that might meet us. And we have a tool in that case that can help us to feel a little bit more confident about moving forward. And that's a flashlight. And we all know from having used flashlights that the flashlight doesn't give you the direction to the end, to the destination. It doesn't show you the whole path. But what it does do, it illuminates just enough of the path to give you confidence to move forward. And as you move forward, it illuminates a little bit more of the path. So it helps you to make progress incrementally towards that bigger change. And in this analogy, I think of the flashlight as design tools and design process, which again is not going to tell you what the innovative solution is that you're trying to implement, but it will help illuminate the path towards that innovation a little bit by little bit, and gives people enough confidence to take that first step and discover something about the system, and then take the next step until eventually you land in a place of positive change. But this analogy, most people, like this analogy presumes that you even want to be on that road towards innovative solutions in the first place. And most people, are not motivated to leave their cozy, comfortable cabin where they know everything is and it is familiar. It's really hard to get folks to even agree to get outside of that comfort zone. And it's even more difficult when there are perceived threats outside. And so obviously, when people have that fear that something bad is going to happen, it's even more difficult. So this is the only pun of my presentation, I promise, and it was an accident, but here it is. So what are some of those barriers to innovation in schools? What are the things that prevent people from wanting to leave the status quo? One of them is path dependence, or this idea that that there's simply no other way to do school, right? Like it's always been done this way. We simply can't imagine a different version of things. Our own baggage, right? So I think that education is unique in that we are the product of the system that we're working inside. And that is, unique, right? Like, for most people who train to become lawyers, hopefully they were not involved in the legal system as children, as they were gaining their education. And but for educators, we were in school for many years and recipients of that education. And then we kind of step back into schools then as the leadership. And I think that can create some blinders for us, right? That this is how it was for me. And I, again, can't imagine another way. High school, middle school, elementary school, kindergarten, this is what this looks like, because this is what I know it to be. There's also, a good dose of risk aversion, which I think is completely fair. When you're charged with educating young people and ensuring that they have what they need to succeed, it can feel really high stakes, right? You can't afford to have this experiment fail and underserve a group of students. And so that's also in the mix, this feeling of we want to do what we know maybe works okay, because it's more preferable than trying something that might not work at all. And then obviously lack of resources and trust. And I think that in some ways those things go hand in hand, right? Like we have a lot of conversation about how we allocate resources to schools and how many resources we give to teachers in particular. And that I think is often organized around questions of accountability and how that money is going to be spent, and will it be used effectively. And though that sends messages to educators that they're not trusted. And I think that lack of trust gets pushed down the hierarchy, and kind of lands with a thud on teachers who really bear the brunt of this idea that, you know, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the skills that they need to really lead us toward the change that we want to see. And then obviously systemic challenges. So this idea that you must comply, right? And that there are layers of, again, hierarchy that are creating these rules and regulations, right? So teachers need to comply with the vision of their principal. They need to comply with the vision of the district leadership. They need to comply with the state regulations and the federal regulations. So lots to navigate in terms of what is required. And that means that, you know, there are constraints that you if you're going to, you know, follow the rules, you can't avoid. And what I like to tell educators is that in some ways, those constraints are helpful, right? Because while they might be frustrating, they also create a really clear scope for us about where our sphere of influence is. And that can help us to get inspired and find creative energy to make the changes in the areas that we do have influence over. So how do we let go of our assumptions and our baggage and our kind of understanding of what school is? How do we get comfortable taking risks? And how do we get energized to tackle those systemic challenges, given all of the issues that are surrounding making change in the K-12 system? For me, I believe that first, we need to empower teachers. And I don't even like that word empower, right? Like, I think that it describes, you know, that power lies elsewhere and we need to give it to teachers. And I think that there's some truth in that, like what I was saying, in terms of the kind of layers of hierarchy, et cetera. And in a lot of ways, I think what this really should be is kind of, how do we listen, right? Like, how do we give the opportunity for teachers to make the changes that they see, and make that a part of the job, so that it's not about giving power in certain instances or empowering teachers, but it is about those being kind of core to the profession. But it's not the situation we're in. So we need to think about, again, how do we give that power back to teachers? Next, for me, I think that inspiring and equipping them with some tools and mindsets of human-centered design can help them to have that flashlight and to have some sense of how they can start to move towards systemic change, whether that's an idea that they already have that they want to figure out how to implement and scale, or it's a problem that they know they have, that they need some new thinking around, I think these tools and mindsets can really help. So what is human-centered design? I know a lot of folks on this call know deeply what this is, but for me, the way I define it is that it asks you to consider or reconsider how the decisions you make impact the experiences of others. Human-centered design asks you to elevate the lived experiences and the expertise of end beneficiaries in order to create more equitable, innovative, and effective solutions. And in this case, that is both the teachers and their students, right? So we're elevating the lived expertise and experience of teachers and saying that they should really be the drivers of this change. And we're then asking teachers to really empathize and listen and co-create with their students, who are the end beneficiaries. So with these different perspectives, human-centered design can help illuminate new insights and inspire new solutions to seemingly intractable problems. So in other words, we have, I think, the answers with us already, right? And teachers have those answers and students have those answers. And if they don't know, if they don't have the answer, they're close to the answer. And the question is, how do we uncover, amplify, move out of the way and allow those things to come to be realized? So through techniques for centering the needs of students, generating out-of-the-box ideas, and making to learn, the human-centered design process encourages teachers to tap into their creative genius and potential to innovate. And again, it's not providing them with the answers. What the process does is give new structures and new activities to promote a new way of thinking, right? Or to unlock or uncover the things that are kind of layered underneath those kind of hierarchies and frustrations. Evidence shows that when teachers are empowered to make decisions and create change, student achievement increases. So how have we operationalized this process, right? If we know there's potential there, but the system has struggled to really turn over that change process to teachers, how have we at AKF tried to operationalize this process? And how have we built teachers' capacity with human-centered design? So Schools 2030 is an initiative, and it spans 10 countries, and works with 100 schools per country. And in that process, we've engaged over 5,000 educators in school-based human-centered design to improve learning. And we've seen thousands of learning solutions prototyped and implemented by teachers. We provide flexible response funding to support school-level solutions. So instead of the foundation coming with an initiative to say, we want to see you implement social emotional learning, the teachers discover the ideas that they want to promote and then seek funding to support implementing those solutions. And we provide that funding. And we've seen, optimism, creativity, and joy filling classrooms, bridging the art of teaching with the science of learning. And we've also seen teachers feel reinvigorated and their creative energy kind of unlocked. And in certain cultures that we work in, where there is a lot of hierarchy, seeing teachers start to reimagine themselves as those change makers is pretty exciting. So these are the countries that we work in currently with Schools 2030. So 10 countries across the globe. And the way that we've really operationalized this process is through a toolkit that myself and my colleague, Gray Garman, who is at the University of Texas at Austin, developed in late 2019, early 2020. And when we were designing this toolkit, we listened to the foundation in terms of their initiative and goals and the kind of early sketches of how the program would be implemented, and created some design principles. And the idea here is that there are AKF staff on the ground in each country who are charged with coordinating and implementing this program. And those folks are not necessarily well-versed in human-centered design. They may not have even ever been trained in it formally at all. And so we were thinking about how we could create a toolkit that would be streamlined enough with language that is simplified enough that it could be translated across many countries, while also having enough context that both our staff and the educators we're working with can understand the purpose and meaning behind the activities that they're being asked to do. And so it was a really interesting balance to strike in terms of how much context do we give, and how much do we kind of strip away. So some of those design principles that we created were to support educators to lead identifying challenges and solving them using a human-centered approach. And really that the teachers were kind of in the driver's seat and not even the school leaders or principals. That we would support school leaders and educators to design solutions that are best for their context, that we would support educators to solve problems and leverage existing wisdom in the most difficult conditions, that we would communicate an understanding that choice is a key element of local work, and that educators are not told what to do in their communities through Schools 2030, and that we knew that we needed to be broad enough that the process could be applicable across a wide variety of contexts. You know, we have schools that are in incredibly remote rural areas, and we also have schools that are in more urban settings. And we have obviously schools spanning many different cultures and cultural contexts. So how do we kind of design something that can be kind of universal in that way, while also ensuring that we kind of maintain the integrity of the process? We needed to remove hard to translate jargon, and still have had struggles as these toolkits have been translated for countries to figure out how to translate an idea or a particular word that maybe doesn't have quite the same one-to-one in the local language. So that's definitely been a challenge. Provide a simple enough process that it can be completed with minimal coaching and time investment. So again, knowing that our national coordinators they've now had some training in human-centered design, but little experience. And our teachers have no training in human-centered design. How do we create a toolkit that can drive that learning process and support the design process with that kind of minimal time investment? And then have the voice that assumes teamwork while also creating tools that can be done independently. So again, depending on the school, you might have a school in an urban area with a team of teachers working together, and you might have a school in a rural area where there just aren't enough other teachers to work together. So how can we support people to make progress even when they're working alone? And one of the things that we got inspired by in kind of designing the toolkit is this book, Where There Is No Doctor. And Gray had been in the Peace Corps in Ghana. And when he was about to go out into the field, he was given this book. And the idea of this book is that it's enough medical knowledge to help you to diagnose and triage medical issues, to give you enough time to get to a doctor. But it is obviously not a medical textbook. And it's also more extensive than a first aid kit, right? So how could we kind of draw inspiration from this sweet spot of just enough context and knowledge and background to help people to diagnose and move forward in the process, but not so much that they would need expertise to implement the process, and not so little that they're really only able to put a Band-Aid on the problem and not get to deeper insights. So that was a big inspiration for us. This is what the toolkit looks like. And we have versions, PDF version, obviously, that then can be printed out. We have a PowerPoint version to help our teams translate and share the toolkit. And we have posted this as a free and open resource at schools2030.org. And on the website, we've also broken down the toolkit by tool. And there's videos there of Gray and myself working through the toolkit on our own through a design challenge related to COVID learning, to demonstrate how you might kind of think through the process and each of the tools. We were lucky enough to be, this was 2021, sorry. We were lucky enough to be recognized by Fast Company and Core 77 as well for the toolkit and the initiative of putting the toolkit in the hands of teachers to help inspire them to move towards change in their system. Here's a picture of the website. And if you go up at the navigation bar to the 3 steps and click on Innovate, you'll land on this page. And again, you can see all the tools and resources available by booklet, by phase, and there's videos and tools posted there as well, all free and open source. The 3 kind of big buckets that we created, one was the educator toolkit itself, to help guide teachers through the process. One was a school leader guide. So again, we really wanted to see teachers in the driver's seat. And so the school leader guide is all about helping nudge school leaders toward creating space and stepping aside to let teachers really drive the process. So there's some questions in there about resourcing and goals and things, but also some guidance around creating that space for teachers. And then a facilitator's guide. So knowing that our country staff were going to be going through the process of guiding teachers, training them, supporting them, we wanted to create a facilitator's guide that would give context to further context to each of the tools and the phases. We created these phases that map very closely to the kind of traditional hexagons that came out of the D school, but trying to, again, think of different and new jargon, or not new jargon, like to think of different ways to communicate to get away from some of the terms that might feel like jargon. We also built into the process a test and iterate phase, iterate and test another phase, because we wanted to make sure that kind of structurally there was that call to not only test your idea, but then also test it again. So we built that into the phases. We also added, so explore, maps on to empathize, define, generate, make is prototype, and test. We added the iterate and test another. We also added the launch phase, which is all about teachers reflecting on the assets and challenges that they have, looking at data if they have access to it from an equity lens, looking at research related to the challenges that they're facing. So kind of doing that work to understand the context from a variety of perspectives before they jump into their design process. And then we also added implement and tell. And implement is all about thinking about how to scale the idea that you have developed and how you would plan out that process of implementing at scale. And then tell is about communicating to your community and then beyond to the regional, national, global communities about the solution so that it can get taken up in other contexts. And then here's some images of the toolkit that has been translated. This is Portuguese. This is Russian, which our colleagues in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, a common language in that region is Russian. Here is an image of a woman in Kenya using the toolkit. Here's some pictures of the tools blown up and having been translated into Hindi. So this is in India. Some more pictures of the workshop there. So again, just to return to this idea, like how might we better enable teachers to design, prototype, evaluate, and iterate new educational innovations that work in their classroom, but also can inform future policy, research, and practice at scale. And one of the ways that we're working on that is we have a global forum every year in June. Last year, we were in Tanzania. We had our national coordinators and also teachers from all of the 10 countries come and be able to present the solution that they developed at that global level in front of researchers, donors, policymakers to help inspire them to think differently about the changes that might be implemented. And what can we do as a collective to give teachers what they need to be the drivers of innovation and really uncover again the solutions that are there or very close to being realized, but they just teachers need the time and the space and the support to actually get them done. So here's some more pictures of teachers with some of the prototypes they created in these different contexts, sharing their ideas, presenting what they think their students need. The picture on the right is in Kenya, and it's a school leader. And my colleague was talking about, feeling like seeing this school leader also embody this kind of creative risk-taking and being silly was really a great indicator of some of the culture change and shift that we're starting to see. Because, in these hierarchical environments, it's not a typical thing to see. And honestly, in the United States, it's not a typical thing to see. And so she used that to demonstrate that positive change was happening. Some more, these are folks in Central Asia with their prototypes. And then let me see what time. I may skip this. I can send this in the chat, but it's a video that was made by our colleagues in Kyrgyzstan about a early childhood solution that was developed around in that region, a lot of kind of parent age folks actually migrate to Russia for better job and economic opportunities. And then they send money home, and their kids are raised by the grandparents. And so the teacher really, interviewed students and grandparents and parents that were in Russia and came up with a solution where parents would video chat into the classroom and read stories to their kids. And that was a way to motivate the kids to actually want to come to preschool and learn. And so I'll send a link to that, and you can see the context and hear from them about that experience. So kind of final parting words. I love this quote from Albert Einstein. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking. And I added in funding requirements or policies or hierarchy that we used when we created them, right? So I think we're never going to really change the status quo if we keep using the same approaches, and we keep enshrining the same power with the same people. So we need to really shake things up if we're going to unlock the changes that we're trying to see in the system. And that we believe firmly at Schools 2030 that the way to achieve this change and create equitable outcomes for all students lives in the classroom. And our approach is that schools should be at the center of social change and not the target of the change. So these are some colleagues actually got the chance to go to Kenya and train in person all of our national coordinators and staff in East Africa in February 2020. So right before the pandemic, literally got home, like 3 days before everything shut down. And when I left, obviously, y'all remember this, things weren't as bad as when I was coming home. So, but I got the chance to meet folks and train them in person. And then the world shut down. And so we transitioned to online, and I ran a online training for all the rest of our staff over several months. And we were using the online training as an opportunity for them to work on also COVID response solutions. And so we did that together in a virtual space. And that's really what kickstarted the project. And since then, I've been kind of coaching and supporting our national coordinators, and then thinking about improving the tools as well. One of the outcomes that we've come to is that we need more streamlined tools. And I'll actually stop sharing my screen. We really wanted to give people that robust process with all the context in a simplified way. And with the hope that then people on the ground would kind of curate and make changes to their approach that was customized for the needs of their community. And what we found, at least in the first year, was that our staff didn't feel like they still didn't have enough context to make those decisions and cut things out. And so then in response to that first cycle, I started to develop sprints, so sprint versions of the toolkit that cut down on the tools, streamline the process. I'm the one kind of making those decisions. Our staff feel like they have confidence of the expert making those decisions. And we created a sprint that starts with the kind of explore, empathize phase. And we created a sprint that also starts with prototyping. So if a teacher or if a school comes in with some ideas in mind that they want to test, they can also start in that place. So that's one of the ways that the toolkit has evolved. I also have on my list for 2023 to revisit and make edits and changes to the broader toolkit based on feedback. So we're evolving the tool, but for now we have that resource available for folks. And it's been fascinating and a real privilege to see it being taken up in so many different contexts. So anyway, thank you. That's my talk.
Amazing, Katie. Yeah, I'll echo what Christian just said too, and say I'm emotional just listening to you talk about the work and just hearing how you lead with such love and compassion and empathy, and beautiful inside and out in terms of the outcomes, and also how you're leading with such great leadership too. That's amazing to hear. So yeah, I'll just start with a question and pass it over to everybody else. And, I think it's a smaller group now, so we could just kind of voice our questions as we go. But my first one is, I love the flashlight metaphor that you shared at the beginning. And I wonder, I'd love to just hear some stories of aha moments. Like sometimes my favorite moments are with groups of people when they didn't want the flashlight, to your point. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, sign me up, I'm ready, because they heard something from a student or a learner that kind of unlocked it for them. So I wonder if you might share a story or two about people that didn't want the flashlight, and then they were like, give me the flashlight because I want to make some change happen now.
Yeah. Well, I think that just as you kind of mentioned, I think the primary moment when that gets unlocked for people is when they're asked to go and listen to stakeholders. And I had the honor of traveling to Central Asia about a year ago, and I got to go visit a school. And this school, so it was a 12-hour drive from the capital city to this town, which is nestled in the mountains. The town is about 30,000 people. It's called Krummeck. And then we drove another hour outside of that to this little tiny village in an extremely remote mountainous area. And I got to meet with two teachers who are doing the process. They live close by their students. They're from the community. They are deeply connected to this place. And part of their reflection was, we walked with our students, we ate with them, we listened to them, and we were so surprised to learn about their perspective. Like, I thought I knew everything about this context, and I didn't. I had things to learn. And I think that it's that moment when the flashlight kind of switches on and people realize, like, oh, I don't have all the answers, and the things that I'm doing are well-intentioned and maybe effective, mostly, but there are things I don't understand that I need to kind of step back and listen more. And I think that there's also, just in my work in the United States and with Schools 2030, a lot of times people are well aware of the issues in the education system. They're just too scared, right? Like, they're too scared to actually step out. And there's too many of those kind of mental models that I was describing that prevent people from making that leap. And so I think a lot of times people know that things need to change, and they don't know how, or they're too scared. And I think that's where the design process can be so helpful, because it can kind of remove the cognitive load of, like, what is the answer? And it just gives you activities to do step by step, incrementally, to make that progress. And then once you start to make the progress, you get momentum, and you see, like, oh, we can make changes. And even things I'm doing in my classroom at the classroom level can have big impact. So
nice.
Yeah.
Christian, you want to ask your question there?
Yeah, Katie, first of all, this is just a real gift. Thank you. I am curious about because it's really tempting to see human-centered design as a curricular method. So a fourth grader will use this method to solve a problem in social studies or math or community service. But as I hear you, I'm just wondering what your lived experience, so to speak, over time has been with teachers who say, I want to serve my kids. I have those obligations and ethical responsibilities and passion, but I'm using this to think about faculty meetings, or I'm using this to think about community X, Y, or Z, or lunch, but I'm not trying to convert it to what my kids do on a Tuesday afternoon in second period, so to speak, versus those who go, obviously, I want my kids to use the same method. So because intellectually, I can imagine that whole spectrum being deployable, but I'm wondering, what have you literally seen emerge naturally as opposed to be suggested?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an interesting kind of meta situation with design thinking or human-centered design, where it can be the process for solving problems. It also can be the solution to your point. Like, and so I think what I've experienced is really setting aside time, kind of bringing together cohorts of people with the really specific goal of and the really clear context, like you're using this process to come up with solutions toward also a more defined scope, right? So maybe we're working on creating more equitable learning practices for students in an area that they're not everyone is succeeding. And that could be in something that would benefit from design thinking, but it could be not, right? Like thinking about other areas of the school that are designed. And I think partly just raising awareness or kind of consciousness really about how much of school is designed. I think this is true for all of us in life. Like, so much of what we encounter every day just has always been there. It feels inevitable. It maybe even feels natural, even though it's been built and decided upon by people. And so how do we just step back and say, the way your students go to lunch is a designed process, right? Like, I was just talking to my partner about this yesterday. It's like, I think, people also, this is part of the power of human-centered design, is it asks people to reconsider the implications of the decisions they're making. So, it may have been well-intended to put the trophy case right at the front doors of the school whenever it was installed there 50 years ago or whenever. And we just accept that that's where it should be, and that will be always how it is. And with human-centered design, it asks you to step back and say, what are the messages that kids receive when they see that, or when parents come in to talk to the vice principal about their student not succeeding, and that's the thing that is at the forefront of the school, right? Like, what are you communicating about what you value? And I think, again, we just can lose sight of that in the day-to-day. Like, you walk by that case every day, you just don't think about it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like a good, clear answer to your question, but I think being intentional, trying to also expand, whenever I start with a group, I, talk about this. I contextualize our work together about kind of decision-making and power, and the school being a designed experience. And so I think that helps situate it for folks too, in terms of, I'm here to reimagine and investigate kind of the experience of students. And that means that I could open up and unlock solutions in many areas. And then sometimes people want to then turn to design thinking as a curricular approach. But I think just setting that intention and setting the context can help. But it is an interesting conundrum, right? Like, because it is this like super meta, like it's the answer and it's the process, and like where are we in that change? So
thanks, Katie.
yeah, thank you.
I know somebody had their hand up, I think. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, thank you very much for this discussion. It was very lovely to learn. I'm a new learning design and technology student. I am from Mongolia. I'm Atma, and I have two questions. How did you choose those countries, and did you had to make any adjustments to fit into different cultures and environments in order to have them the flashlight for them? And how do you keep motivating the teachers? And how can we keep the spirits alive for teachers, especially if they have the overloads of work and have so many things on their desk?
Yeah, great questions. So what I'll say is I did not choose the countries. I came in kind of once Schools 2030 was, the program was formed, but they needed the kind of content to drive the program. And those countries are largely selected around where AKF has country offices and programming and staff. So that was really the decision making kind of criteria. And to your other question, you know, I think the importance of that, the reason for that is that we have staff and an office on the ground in each of those countries who can be the kind of translator of this universal process to a local context. And there are different cultural challenges in different countries around taking up the process. You know, where do people get stuck? Where are they unsure? And each of our staff in country are from that country, they're from the context, and they can help be the translators. They also give me feedback to say, you know, this idea of prototyping, like it doesn't exist. Like I don't know how to translate it. So it's really been a collaboration with each of our teams in country, and then those folks helping to translate and coach people through the different kind of parts of the process that are more or less comfortable based on some of the values of the country culture. The second question is a great one. And I think it's, you know, part of the larger challenge in terms of how do we create space for teachers to be the drivers of change that we need them to be? And some of that is a policy conversation that's above that level of the educator themselves. And that's a role that we can play as a foundation, is to say, you know, we can partner with and liaise with countries or with governments to say, you know, we have this program and we want to bring funds to your schools. And part of the kind of requirement is to give teachers space to do this work. And so we can kind of be the brokers of making some of those policy changes. And it's incredibly difficult, right? Like teachers in every country all over the planet are overworked and under-resourced. And, you know, I mean, I think I started my career as a classroom teacher, and one of the biggest challenges is that there's always more that you can do, right? Like if you could work 22 hours a day, like you could make more change, you know, but we know that's not realistic. And so how do you, I mean, also help teachers to find that balance so that they don't like break down or quit. And they're getting their teaching done and the planning done that they need to do. And they have some room to think about some of these bigger questions. So it's hard. It's not easy, but I think a role we can play is helping again to kind of create that partnership and influence policy to make a little bit of space for teachers to think differently.
Katie, thank you so much for your time. We're going to wrap it up now, and we appreciate your presentation. We could sense your passion. It was very evident in the things you do, and it was so fun to hear about that project that you worked with and the toolkit that you built and all the lives that you changed. So well done. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you guys in February at the next Inspiration Hour.
Thank you so
Katie.
much.
Such
Really
insightful,
appreciate it.
beautiful work. Thank
Thank you very
Katie.
much.
Thank you. And
Thank
Katie,
you.
I realized how I think we know each other, by the way, through Gray and probably Kate